Boom. And that's how you do it, people. All right. Finally got his ass. Took me long enough.
Oh! I did good!
Yes, you did do good. Good job. So, I'm going to go ahead and do a team breakdown here. And that way you can try to replicate it for the lower stages. I can already guarantee you that you're not going to be clearing TOE 7 unless you do some heavy investment into Warrior and a couple of Knights. But the key is Taily. Now, I talked about this in my other videos. This is going to be part 8, so it's going to all be abridged. I'm not going to get into any real in-depth stuff here, but let me charge an entry. Oh, I don't have an entry to charge. I already charged it. Okay, so let's go ahead and do a team breakdown here. So I'll go back into the trials. That way they're already all up. Oh, never mind. Okay. Well, I need to do another one anyway. So, all right. So we're going to unlock the dungeon. I already... Oh, okay, there we go. Sorry about that. All right, so clearing 7. Basically, you need a Taily, or you can do Gao, and you can do Nikki. You don't have to have Taily. The nice thing about having Taily, though, is it frees up 2 additional slots for someone else. But Gao and Taily both do the exact same thing. And what is it exactly that they do? So what Taily does that Gao and Nikki both do is they... sorry, the dogs are going off here. And this is exclusive to UT1 on Taily, which fixes the block chance reduction effect to 0, just like Nikki's built-in S1. Okay? Now, hers lasts 8 seconds, and it will only activate if you have that UT. If you have Nikki, you don't need any special UT. You can just run her however you'd like. You can run her as a sub DPS even. This does it for 7 seconds, but with this perk right here, it lasts 10, which is worth noting because his spin does vary in how long it lasts. Sometimes it's 6 or 7 seconds. Sometimes it's the full 10. So Nikki is a guaranteed P block 0 as long as you put it on as soon as that warning shows up for the entire duration of the spin. So that is one advantage to Nikki, assuming you have this perked. So that's the first thing I want to point out, is that you need that P block 0 reduction, because the way Imet works is he accumulates stacks as he's spinning. And as he's accumulating stacks of block, your team is accumulating stacks of bleed. And the more bleed that your team has, the more damage it'll end up taking when he comes out of the spin. So you obviously need the second part of the equation, which is a cleanser. Now, there's several cleansers. You can go with the NPC cleansers like Loman, or you can go with DOS if you're a magic team and you want some M damage amplification. But the best one, and easily the most affordable one, is going to be Glenn. Now, there are a couple warriors that also do a cleanse as well. I believe Priscilla, Scarlet has a cleanse here when she does her S2. So you can use her if you've already got her all leveled up. That's another option for you as well. And honestly, the cleansing is probably the hardest thing to time, because the rate at which you accumulate stacks of bleed increases drastically towards the end of the battle. So you have to time whoever is doing the dispel perfectly. Now, the biggest disadvantage to Glenn, whether you have her S3 Dark perked or not, is the fact that it's either 4 or 5 mana. So it's easily the most expensive cleanse for the team. But clearly, with her being a 5-star A110 and bringing all the P damage, the P defense perks that she brings, as well as the P damage amplification that she brings, it just made sense to use her instead of my Loman. But you need a cleanser. That's the bottom line. And you're going to do that cleanse depending on how fast the stacks are accumulating, and depending what the attack speed of your knight is. Whenever the effect will kick in, it leaves you with a net of 0 stacks, or maybe 1 or 2. So timing on that cleanse is the most complex part. And when you watch the video, you'll see that on a few occasions, I still had a few stacks of bleed on me. But fortunately, the third part of the equation, which is a P damage reduction hero, which are also a couple of them, Demia does a 20%. And then there's Klaus. So you can do Klaus as well. Klaus is actually a 25% damage reduction with his S3 Dark. So the bottom line is that's something that's going to help your team take a lot less damage, even if you miss time the cleanse and end up with a few stacks of bleed. But bleed will go away. What won't go away is his Bladecraft. So if you don't get that P block reduction down to 0 while he is spinning, he will accumulate Bladecraft. Now, what exactly is that? So Bladecraft is this skill right here. Spins its weapon to the front, dealing continuous physical damage while the skill is active. Imet's block chance is continuously increased by a large amount and constantly dispels negative effects from self. So any of your P damage amplifications that you may be throwing at him at that time, they're just going to get wiped unless it's an irremovable effect. So the bottom line is he's constantly dispelling and he's constantly gaining block stacks, which is why you need the UT1 on Taylor, or you just need Nikki, because it makes that effect irremovable and he doesn't gain any block. That all being said, that brings me to the fourth part of the equation. Now, the fourth part I thought was going to actually be the hardest thing to do. But if you actually learn the animations of the character, it's not too difficult to do this fourth part. And what is that fourth part? That fourth part is you'll see a red message across the screen most of the time, not always. So this is why you need to pay attention to the animations, And that message basically says that he's going to go in for an execution. So the execution component is going to target whoever has the lowest physical defense. Now you notice I only have her on a 1-star gear. The reason I did that is because my Manticore gear that I have on Kasel, which gives him the crit line that he needs to have the 1000% crit, since nobody is providing either a crit resistance reduction and or a crit increase, is because he's only got a 2-star piece of Manti gear. So 21,316 defense. Now, you'll notice that his base defense is 6528 on a warrior, but in the case of a knight, in the case, of a knight, it's about 1,000 or so higher. So I did her with a 1-star, and that put her just below Kasel. Otherwise, I was going to have to go and craft another piece of gear with all these P-block lines in order to get the defense lower than him, or I was going to have to sacrifice his DPS and throw a P-def rune on him. Now, I passed that with fantastic hybrid animals. In the other video that you saw me getting them down to 9%, where his DPS was up in the 40,000 range, and I still had 35 or so seconds on the clock, he was using Book of the Mad. Do I think it's possible to beat it with Book of the Mad with his current configuration? I do. I got him to 9%. There's an RNG component there. The only reason why I ended up not beating him is because he accumulated 9 stacks during Bladecraft. So those 9 stacks obviously increased his attack, and even with the attack reduction from Demia, it wasn't enough to mitigate the additional damage. And with him not having any life steal runes on, which when I first started doing it, I actually bought a second rune page and put 1 life steal rune on him. But as it turns out, that sacrificed his DPS entirely too much. But that is a critical thing, that Taily have the lowest PDEF, so that when the execution occurs, you can activate her S2. Now you have to have her S2 perked. You have to have her S2 perked because by default, it doesn't do anything. The other thing that you'll notice is that her defense goes up by 46,000. So if you charge it before he targets her, she will now no longer be the individual with the lowest physical defense. So this is kind of a tricky timing situation here, which is why a lot of people still prefer Gao. I'll get into Gao in a moment. But the bottom line is, if you don't time this right, which is why I thought this was going to be really tough, it'll just kill Kasel or whoever your DPS is. Unless you got a really high level DPS and you're taking the T2 perk where you get half of your physical defense as attack, and getting all that defense also is going to make you a lot harder to kill. But I didn't do that. I didn't take that perk. So this here is something to be aware of if you're riding that line on the lowest defense, okay? When I perked her, I did all her lights. So gains immunity to all damage. This one right here reduces the attack, just like Demia does, which is important if he does happen to get a few stacks of Bladecraft. This one here increases the stacks gained, and this is a really important one to time because the more stacks you have, the more damage amplification you're going to yield against him for whoever your DPS is. So you're going to get 30% by default. So already that's a big boost. And it's all damage if you happen to be doing a hybrid team. But if you manage to get 30 stacks, you get another 60% P damage amplification for a total of 90%. So that's how I'm getting my DPS, even though he's not an A220, up in that 40 to 50,000 range, is because I waited for the 40 stacks. And you'll see in that video there that I did, I wasn't even really using it that much at all. because his DPS was resting above the 30,000 mark, which is what it needs to be in order for you to clear it for pretty much the back half of the battle. Now, Gao is the other option, and I'm sure a lot of you probably already have Gao because he's a really cheap hero in the shop, and he's also extremely viable in Tower of Challenge, Labyrinth, and Black Dragon, a whole host of things. Anything that requires big CC reduction, Gao is your man. Now, Gao has the same kind of a perk on his Vortex movement. Now, the Vortex is my favorite CC move in the game. One, it lasts a long time, especially if he's on lower attack speed. But in addition to that, it's going to completely drop his CC bar. So now, if you ran Gao and Nikki, Glenn, and a DPS, you'd have 3 people that can completely lower his CC bar. And every time that CC bar is lowered fully, you get healed. So that is where you get an advantage with Gao. He does bring some P damage amplification to the table. Not nearly as much as Taily, but you're not going to really be firing Taily on her P damage amp simply because you need to make sure you have her mana up for her S1 and her S2 at all times. So unless he's in a stun phase and you have 5 or 6 bars of mana, you don't want to be firing off her S3 very often. Whereas with this, every time he does his Vortex, which is going to knock his CC bar down, you're getting that 10% increase. And obviously, if you decided to upgrade this, then you'd get even more. The other thing that he brings to the table is the removal of effects. So you could actually, in theory, run Gao and not use someone like Glenn or Loman or Scarlet or Doss, and you can kind of have this guy running 2 roles. Okay? The only thing he can't do is the P block. But either way, you're going to need a P block, an immunity, and a dispel. So Gao, still to me, is a really good guy for ToE, especially if you have him in your inventory. You don't need his unique weapon. You can use a class weapon if you'd prefer, or just any generic weapon. I mean, whatever you decide you want to use. The most important thing is that he has enough P block defense and that he has enough P toughness to withstand all the barrage of hits from both Bladecraft, from the boomerang throw. So if you have a class unique weapon, even if it's a 0-star, at least it can take 3 runes and you can get him on that P block defense and all of that good stuff. Now, that's the safe build. Gao does have a built-in P damage reduction with his T5 Dark perk. So, and he also has a self-heal. So if you run a lot of a lifesteal on him, you can actually keep him alive even if his P block is low. So that's why you see these recovery runes on there, these lifesteal runes on there, because this is who I was using to clear 6 before I ended up with Taily's Soulstone on a random draw, and then I decided to go ahead and give her a shot. Honestly, I think it was easier playing with Nikki and Gao and Loman, which is who I was using at the time, because Loman's Dispel is also a shield, which is really, really handy in the event that you did end up accumulating any stacks of bleed. But at the end of the day, I just found this was a lot more fun. I found it had a lot more healing. When I decided to take Loman out and just put Glenn in, which I was a little bit reluctant about because that was going to mean I needed to buy a 3rd rune page for her, because I already had her on this for Eclipse and this for World Boss. So that would have meant I needed a 3rd rune page, which, is 500 gems, but I don't want to just keep taking runes off either. So now that I know she's the queen in this place, with her S2 doing a full CC bar drop and amping damage against Imet, and her S2 amping damage against Imet, and then of course her S3 bringing loads of attack, loads of defense, and a cleanse, all in a single movement, I decided to go ahead and use her. And I would use her in place of Loman. But I think when I go for 8, I'm probably going to use Gao, Nikki, Glenn, and of course, Dark Kasel. So those are the 4 big things that you have to worry about. Low PDEF on Taily, or whoever, it might be Gao if you decide to use him. Someone that can dispel, which you've got a lot of options there. You can always message me if you want more. You need someone that can reduce his P block to 0 so he's not accumulating any stacks. I don't want to get into this too much. There are several UTs, even Loman, I believe, has one, where it will reduce the block chance of the enemy. But you're sacrificing something else if you do that. So probably wouldn't recommend that. Just get Taily or just get Nikki. Nikki in and of itself is worth it because you're going to get an extra entry every day at the stockade. And trust me, you're going to need to use those entries now that Chapter 10 is coming out and getting those XP vials. So that's what needs to be on the team. And then lastly, of course, you need the immunity. So hopefully this video helps, and we'll talk to you all later. My next video is going to be A2ing Glenn.